Hi, David Goldstein.
Pleasure, David. Welcome.
Michael.
Hey, Michael, what's up?
How you doing?
Did you phone me before?
I don't.
Or all these medical marijuana lawyers look the same?
Yeah, really.
Hey, buddy, you can't come in right now. Wonderful, wonderful. Why don't you take a card? Do you mind if I run my little homie Cammy? Yeah, I'll just like to be able to enjoy it, put it on my website, think about the fact that I was on TV, tell my mommy.
There you go.
Alrighty, great. Let's see, we'll tie this donkey up. So yeah, I've represented 500 collectives. I've got my sort of diploma over there by the coffee maker, and right behind you, and my degree. Yeah, kind of on the window. And then there you go. And then I have my continuing education of the bar certificate for medical marijuana from 2006, sort of back here behind the statuette.
So are you representing now places now that have been closed down?
Yeah, I'm in litigation against the city of LA on behalf of about 30 of them.
Right. Okay. Presently? No?
Yeah.
Can I move some of this stuff off the table here?
I'd rather you not.
Okay, that's fine.
You mean to make it look like I'm not the mess and pick I am?
We'll leave it right there.
Thanks.
Not a problem. I'll shoot you.
He's just
If
trying to
it's
make
in
it
the
look.
way,
I'll shoot right around.
if it's in the way, it's fine. But if it's to make me other than I am,
No,
it's
it's
cool.
okay. No problem.
As you can see, I'm not putting on airs. I could definitely be renting in Century City. I've done that before.
We won't use the table, then we'll just put you guys right.
So are you fighting them on behalf claiming Prop D is what?
Prop D is
Unenforceable?
unconstitutional.
Is it?
Yeah, Prop D is unconstitutional. I made a copy of Prop D and also of a case that's interesting that I wanted to share with you. But if you want, first of all, if the city council wants to refer something to the people to vote on, they can. But it has to be something that they themselves could enact. So in other words, the city council can't enact something they themselves couldn't enact by whitewashing it, by giving it to the people to vote on. So since the city council would have had to do a planning commission hearing if they themselves wanted to pass this law, then it's also true that I'm sitting here. I'm sitting here. I don't want to do that, whatever, 60 minutes thing. I'm sitting here. That's cool. So anyway, the city council can't do what they couldn't do themselves by the people. So since the city council didn't do a planning commission hearing, therefore they can't have the people pass such a rule. Another reason why it's illegal, as I mentioned the other day, is like, let's say that you had a bunch of pizza vendors who said, you know, if you haven't been selling pizza since 1999, you really don't know doodling about pizza. You shouldn't be able to do business in LA. It's just a contract that is in violation of the principle of monopoly. Or for instance, you've been a newscaster for 20 years. Imagine if someone said, you can't do it if you haven't been at it for 25 years. Just go home. It doesn't matter that you've been doing it. It doesn't matter that you're otherwise qualified or that you have a job, a contract, a lease, a license, in the case of these places, a seller's permit, a nonprofit, patience. So in other words, state law, when it was passed, didn't say these people can have collectives and these people can't.
Right.
Okay. And so then now it's just come down to the cities kind of using their power to destroy these collectives. And in this case, Proposition D, it just doesn't pass muster. So if the city wants to regulate, then they must do so fairly. That's the idea. Yes, cities do regulate and they use zoning and licensing to do so, but they must do so fairly.
And what we found is a number of these places that the city attorney claims have been shut down, just move, reopen again, or even stay there and change the name and reopen again.
That doesn't surprise me. The city attorney is an elected official with a political career ahead of him. So he is, hopefully. And look at Steve Cooley, we saw his career crash and burn. One of the things that he did was take a position against the medical marijuana community. We think that was part of what caused him to not be elevated and elected. He had a very close election, but failed. And I think that the main distinction, the main thing that made him lose was the fact that he wasn't supporting the medical marijuana community, although he said he would in early emails to the various activists and stuff. Same with Mike Fury. He's not a bad guy. I'm sure he did say when he was coming into office that he was going to support the patients, but if you're a party politician, supporting the patients means Prop D. Like, oh, we're magnanimous, we've allowed safe access for patients. Isn't that nice? LA has safe access, so it's hard to argue. Well, they're terrible people. They're not terrible people. They still treat people as a second-class citizen.
Should they be limited though at all?
Of course not. There's already a limitation in the universe called supply and demand, the free market system, and also the free volunteerism system. So if they want to volunteer to open up a nonprofit, if there are no people that want to come around, they're not going to be able to make a living, they're going to have to shut down. Just like there's no one who tells Americans, should you be a reporter, a lawyer, or a pizza owner.
Wasn't there a movement in South LA to limit liquor stores a few years ago? I think?
You know, liquor stores cause a lot of damage. Show me some bodies from medical marijuana. Liquor is a sin. Medical marijuana is a doctor-recommended medicine. I don't see a limitation on Rite Aids. I mean, there are too many. I'll say that there are too many Rite Aids and big box stores and not enough mom and pop. And I think the good service you used to get from your mom and pop pharmacist, it's almost gone. When I had an operation and they gave me a very serious opiate, they spent less time counseling me than a typical marijuana collector might spend if they know what they're doing. I have my own prejudice and I love my own people, don't get me wrong, but I'll try to be as rational as I can.
Well, you're advocating for your side.
I do. I advocate.
That's why I'm talking to you.
I hear you, and I advocate for the medical marijuana community and people.
That's
And
why I'm here.
I know you are. And I'd offer you coffee too, or a water. Just make yourself at home.
Nah, thanks.
Heaven knows I pumped up on enough espresso before you got here.
Did you?
Well, I had a good shot of these. I don't want to vibrate in front of the camera. I don't want to throw off the camera.
Take a lot more to throw him off.
I have a feeling that's true. With your job, it can get pretty grisly. You've seen it all.
Let's do it. Yeah, well, let me see the lights changing outside. That's what I'm dealing with here.
Sorry. You better go night-night, Tony.
Can you put your phone on vibrate?
I already did.
All right.
I'm that kind of guy. But I'll check it anyway because I'm that kind of guy. How bad's the reflection off my glasses?
I have no reflection on your glasses as of yet.
Oh, sweet. I have some fakeonies that I've used for my YouTubes. But I won't be able to see you. But I don't know if you'll be throwing me much in the way of facial expressions. I know sense of humor doesn't work in the news. So.
And then what's up?
I don't know about this desk. I could have tried to clean it, but I don't want to do something fake for the news.
It'll all work out fine. After all that, you'll be here and here anyways. It doesn't matter. It's the magic of television.
It is magic. I remember I had a yoga studio and I had been interviewed by Manny Madrano way back in the day, Channel 11, I think it was. Or was it 4? 4. And I had dropped out of law to teach yoga, so that became an interesting story. When I was a lawyer, no one gave a shit about me back then. But when I quit to become a yoga dude, that was interesting. And so he came and interviewed me, and I was convinced, oh, I'm going to be busy tomorrow. I mean, this place is going to blow up. I was on TV, you know. But I learned that the whole universe doesn't exactly change, but it is really nice to be on. And I'm proud to represent what I do.
Mind if I crack the door?
Not at all. Make your move. In fact, there may be some sound issues out there. So if you want to close it, that's cool too. Yeah, it'll just pop up.
Yeah, no,
He really was. He wound up covering me. It was my first interview. And so I just didn't know what to do, but I figured out on my own, probably look at the dude and not look at the camera. That was my brilliant idea I came up with. Yeah.
And then just talk.
I thought of that on my own,
Yeah.
with my whole IQ.
Well, Manny should have told you that.
Maybe he did. Maybe that's what made it easy. So I just stare right in the camera, right?
Exactly.
Hi, Mom. Okay. Or take a couple. I've had some DAs tell me that those are valuable keepsakes. I just won a case on preliminary hearing where I was an expert witness, and I testified for 2 days on the stand to help support the defense. And in the end of the rainbow, the case was dismissed. But I wasn't there to give the guy some pens because I got excused early.
What was that case?
It was a criminal case in 210 West Temple Street about 2 weeks ago. One of the collectives, some kind of very ambitious cop just decided to go after this collective, and the judge didn't go for it. And by the way, that collective was not Prop D. It was an LA collective that's one of my clients in the lawsuit. And they have reasons why they are Prop D compliant or exempt-ish, because they really were open since 2006, but the city doesn't acknowledge them. But the judge didn't consider that at all in his ruling on whether he was going to dismiss the case. All he wanted to know was if they were a nonprofit and a properly formed collective paying their sales tax.
Mm-hmm.
So the issue of local law, to understand the issue of local law is to realize that the locals really only have jurisdiction on zoning and licensing. They don't have jurisdiction over medical marijuana itself per se. That's a state defense and a state phenomenon. So in the past, we've all tried to argue, well, the cities shouldn't be able to derogate from or take away from medical marijuana rights because they're from the state. But then we have the Riverside decision, which says cities may regulate.
Right.
So we are now in the post-Riverside decision environment in which cities may regulate. But they still have to do so fairly. And that's the thing that I have against Prop P. I don't think it does so fairly.
Okay. All right, we're ready here. What is wrong with a city, in this case the city of Los Angeles, trying to regulate medical marijuana?
There's absolutely nothing wrong with regulating medical marijuana as the current case law is constituted. The Riverside decision says that it is firmly vested within the city's rights to govern licensing and zoning with respect to medical marijuana.
So what's wrong with Prop D?
Well, although the cities may regulate medical marijuana, according to the Riverside decision, they must do so fairly. The problems with Prop D are so many that we listed them in a 100-plus page complaint to the Superior Court here, and I represent 30 collectives that are challenging Prop D. One of the problems with Prop D is that it is a zoning ordinance. As you read it, it determines the place or location where marijuana activity may take place. Since it's a zoning ordinance, by law, it has to go through a zoning hearing before the Planning Commission. Ask the city attorney, Proposition D never went through a Planning Commission hearing. The city attorney will say, well, it went through a vote of the people, that should suffice. But no, there are many cases which point out that the type of things that are discussed and handled in a Planning Commission hearing are different from the dynamics of an election. So what really should happen is the city council should vet something that's going to get referred to the people for voting, and they should have vetted it by bringing it before planning. That would have given the people an opportunity to be heard, and the stakeholders, including neighborhoods and collective managers, to be heard.
But weren't the people heard by voting and passing Prop D?
Oh, of course.
Which said 135 dispensaries should be in the city?
Well, it didn't say that. It listed a bunch of criteria which, if you boil them down, said that, let's say, the starting number would be 135, but when you really went through it, maybe 80. And yes, the people voted for it, but that's not enough. The reason is because in a Planning Commission hearing, the city council members are going to hear from officials and experts, people who are city planners, people who work on density, patients, landlords, collective managers. As it was, these people were not given a hearing, and the law makes it very clear that an election is not equal to a Planning Commission hearing. So it's just a matter of California case law. It's already been established that what was done was not legal.
Do you believe the city attorney, or do you believe the city has a right to close down these dispensaries? They said they've closed down more than 500.
Well, the law of Prop D says that they have that right on its face. If Prop D was illegally passed and there was no Planning Commission hearing, then no, the city attorney really shouldn't be closing down those establishments of associated patients because they are functioning pursuant to state law. State law says that patients may associate within the state to cultivate, transport, and distribute marijuana among their patient members.
But the city attorney is doing it, is going ahead. Are you people challenging the legality of Prop D?
Yes, I am among 4 attorneys that have joined together, and we represent together about 30 collectives that have challenged Prop D, and we are currently in court before We're currently in court before a Superior Court judge on one of the matters and the Court of Appeal on the other matter, but they're currently pending.
Now, we found a number of, more than 10% of the dispensaries that the city attorney claims to have shut down have just moved and reopened or changed their name and reopened.
Yes, unfortunately, the city is experiencing the problem that happens when you try to regulate something that is contrary to the public's will. In other words, there are thousands and thousands of patients and collective managers who desire access to medical marijuana. There will not be a reduction in the total demand by reducing the number of stores. If anything, that just increases the demand in those existing monopoly stores. So what's happening is people are engaging in civil disobedience and they're opening. But that's not any different than the civil disobedience that every medical marijuana collective is engaging in because of federal law. Remember, federal law still says it's a felony to grow, sell, or distribute marijuana, period. So it's not totally surprising that some collectives are willing to risk the scary misdemeanor of Prop D. Proposition D, for all of its teeth, is just a misdemeanor. And it's just a zoning and licensing ordinance. It's not even a drug ordinance under the law. Drug law is exclusively occupied by state law in California. The cities may not create drug law, just like the cities may not create felonies in their municipal codes. They can only create misdemeanors about zoning and licensing, not about drugs.
So when Mike Fiore comes out there and says, I've closed down 500 medical marijuana dispensaries,
it's probably true, but he's not also adding the other figure that would make it a little bit more of a fair comparison by pointing out how many collectives may have opened since he's been in office.
which he says he's still going to prosecute.
Well, he's got to do his job. He's sworn to uphold the law, and I respect his office. I have been an expert witness in multiple trials, and I will say that the judges in the felony cases are completely unconcerned about whether the city license is in place or not. So state law allows a good defense against the felony of possession for sale for a properly formed nonprofit, regardless of whether they have a city license. So the collectives that are opening are taking sort of a calculated risk as civil disobedience that the misdemeanor of Proposition D is just not going to stop them from helping their patients and themselves and their families. And that if they are stopped, though, they have to bear the responsibility of what they do. I can, as an attorney, of course, can't recommend someone do anything with marijuana. It's still a federal felony. So for all the information I give people, it's up to them what they do with this knowledge.
Okay, great. Beautiful. Sit there a second, we'll get a couple of shots.
I don't know if I convinced you to vote my way, but thank you. Your questions are good. I know, but your questions are good. You're
I'm an impartial observer here.
Now, are you going to nod knowingly now for the camera and pretend I'm talking to you?
Stop smiling.
Well, lawyers are actors too.
There you go. There you go. But it still is, some streets you go to, and there are dispensaries, 2, 3, 4 on a block or two.
That could be true, but here's my view on that. There are also areas where there are a lot of bookstores, record stores, strip bars, bars, and so consumers have a choice in those areas. Do they want to go here, there, or somewhere else? I mean, if there isn't enough foot traffic to support that many medical marijuana collectives in a zone, then they're going to shut down. So I think there's like this built-in check and balance that we already have as good Americans, which is just called free enterprise, free volunteerism. And I'd like to see people not worry about micromanaging someone else. In other words, does it really matter if there's multiple marijuana places on a corner or nearby? Show me the bodies of where that creates crime. Really, the crime is created with alcohol, with drunk driving. We have terrible number of deaths. It turns out every place there's medical marijuana, they have less suicides, less opiate overdoses, less opiate use, less car accidents, less drunk driving. So people, when they get high, they drive carefully. It's not like booze. Booze,
Are
you're
there
like,
studies to back that up?
yeah, I'll show you some studies. What they do is they overcompensate. When people drink, they have like a confidence like they're one with the wheel, they're doing fine, and they drive frivolously. When people are stoned, they know that they're a little bit impaired, but they're 20% impaired, but then they give 30% more attention. And I'm just telling you, if you look at it, the bodies, they aren't there. When the Boston coroner did a study of all bodies killed in car accidents, he found like 50% had booze in their system, 2% had pot in their system. He estimated about 5 to 10% of the people use pot at least once a month, so there should have been 5 or 10% with pot in their system. You could only conclude that using pot made you less likely to have an accident than doing nothing at all or using booze. And I know figures lie and liars figure, but the truth is, stone drivers just in general don't cause accidents. Maybe a young teenager who's stoned would be dangerous.
Yeah.
An adult who's stoned just drives like a little old man.
All right.
Okay, so don't follow me because I drive like a little old man.
I can steal your pen.
I want you to. They're souvenirs. I appreciate you coming through and covering the story, believe me.
Oh, thanks.
Giving me a chance to say my piece. One of the judges was so good to me, Judge Anthony J. Moore, which was being covered last time that I named him about this dog. I named him Tony after Judge Moore.
Oh, really?
Yeah, this is Judge Moore right here. This is Judge Anthony J. Moore. Right, Tony? That was fun, huh? Daddy gonna be on TV. Oh, man. You guys really made me get dressed on a Friday. I was very comfortable in a t-shirt.
I'm sorry about that.
That's okay. Anything you guys need, if you want to follow up, you know you're always welcome. That's what I love to do, is talk about my topic.
I appreciate it.
Oh, wow. So what's the deal? Is it going to be this way? You guys on top of the weather too, aren't you?
I
This is
know.
not good weather. This is not